Yeah, let's talk about go live, right? This is something that we talk about all the time. A lot of times our vendors like to set a go live date, and we encourage our clients to think from a holistic view and say, hey, what does go live mean to you and your organization? Does it mean that all the lights turn on and you have a power on for your solution, or does it mean that you're running checks in the new system, you're onboarding in the new system? What does go live mean to you, and not letting your vendor determine what that means for you. So can you talk a little bit about go live dates, Robert, and how that might affect your timeline?
Oh yeah, so there's always that balance between go live has to be pretty well nailed down because again, in the larger organizations, there are periods of time where HR is not going to be available, especially if they're an entity that does hiring seasonally or at certain times of the
Right.
year. They're going to need to be able to dedicate a lot of time for that 2, 3, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, even position control and building out the budgeting that you have to do to get approved so then you can go out to the hiring season, your next hiring season, and hire. These are all day ranges that there's a compromise that has to be made. Either it's the client saying, no way you can have my staff for these 3 weeks. Or it's going to be the software vendor going, if we are going to be able to make it to UAT at this particular point, so the go live isn't threatened, I am going to need some of your staff time. But let me tell you what I'm going to need, and let's see if we can make that work out. So some cases that go live date is still a little soft, and it can be part of the planning process to figure out when exactly that's going to be. Other cases, we've walked into clients and they're like, no, end of the year, I have to be off the system. The support is done. It's run out. There's no one else that's going to do anything for it. And I can't live with an unsupported ERP system. I have to make a go live by 12/31 of the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to vary. And so, of course, the factors involved with that are going to vary to some degree as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be able to stretch turning a go live into 2 years down the road, which is
That's right.
that seems like an eternity when you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with a system that right now is not doing what you need it to do. So it's going to vary from client to client. And it's also going to be cost factor is usually the biggest one. We can give
Oh
you
yeah.
lots of time to do the project, but it's going to cost you a lot more to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all these pressures from your staff, from the fact that your existing system doesn't work, that's going to go into play on those. So those conversations can be very straightforward. They can also be couched in a lot of nuance that we have to walk people through until we get the answer that we need and that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And so that process, in some cases, on some projects, that's a continuing discussion on
Yeah.
Go Live is to what is actually going to be the definition of when you're ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
and at what point is that actually going to make sense for you to do.
Right, right. You touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about clients who we work with who their current systems have a sunset date, right? And so we're trying to do a lot of work again in a shorter time frame to combat that, because maybe a client, wants to have a new system selected before their sunset date. Walk us through how we go about educating clients, helping clients define what the best approach is and how that may affect the overall timeline for implementation.
Yeah, a lot of it is vetting the realities of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Your system might no longer have support by the end of the year, and diving into, okay, what does that mean? Is there an option of support there, but you declined to do it because of the cost, or because you wanted to move to the new system as quickly as possible? Is this an absolutely drop dead date? There will be no customer support for your existing system past this particular date.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, finding solutions. Are there other folks who are willing to support the system for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and just be able to keep it going for that period of time? Then that weighs into the decision of, okay, then let's go back to timeline. And is 9 months realistic to do an entire discovery, selection,
Right.
contract negotiation, and implementation? In most cases, no.
No.
Not always no, but in most cases, it's no. It can
Mm-hmm.
be done, but you also have to look at the battleship that you're trying to steer. If this is county government with 600, 700, 2,000, 3,000 employees. That's a heck of a lot of change management,
Oh
and you're
yeah.
just not able to steer the ship that quickly in those cases. Some clients, if it's a subcomponent of ERP or it's a module in ERP and you're just replacing that particular system, yes, you can do that on a shorter timeline. But then that also invites the discussion of, do you want best of breed or do you want integrated ultimately for your ERP? Because just solving this little piece of it now could make it more difficult for what you want to do with ERP later on down the road. So these are all the little nuance and caveat situations that get involved in these decisions.
So what would your advice be to that client who may have a sunset date approaching or in the near future? How do they go about planning for that, or what advice would you give to them?
Make sure that those dates are real, and run that down. Just don't take someone's word for it of the software vendor said they're no longer going to support our current system, as of Q1 2026. And does that mean that the software vendor is still willing to support you, but you have to move to their SaaS environment and do a conversion there? Does that mean the software company is not going to support that particular brand anymore whatsoever? And make sure you know the details of that, because you need to know what your options are. And the options can include, like what I also said, there are other companies, there are third parties that would be willing to support that platform on a month by month or quarter by quarter basis, if that's what you need to be able to plug the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I would step back and ask yourself, is that the only thing that is driving my need to go live on this particular date?
Mm-hmm.
Vet those and get your options on that. And you're probably going to have to reach out to someone, likely us, to help figure out what those options are. But again, I love handing out free advice. If that's on your mind and you need some firmer decisions or you need some clarity on that, just talking to us for an hour, we can walk you through a number of scenarios that will help determine, is that a real drop dead date, or is that a date that, yes, there's implications, but there's ways to overcome that and change that date, and then take a little bit of pressure off of your budget and your staff to have to do this immediately in this fiscal year.
Yeah. The point is you have options, right? I think vendors a lot of times try to scare our clients into, hey, this is going away. You've got to do something now, right? But you do have options. And as Robert said, please reach out to us. We're happy to decipher through those options for you. So I'm going to go to the comments, Robert. Robert is on site with the client, guys. So we're going to have to wrap this up shortly. So I want to make sure I get to the comments before we wrap up. And again, if you have questions after we do wrap up, please feel free to continue to comment. So Bent is joining us today. He says, hey, Robert, nice to see you again. My question is, what do you do when everything is running very smooth and we don't need modernization?
There's two. You need to retire because you become a dinosaur. Or two, you need to look at what all your vulnerabilities are, because modernization, and especially the security aspect of modernization, really is carried from moment to moment. Because your public expectations honestly get carried from moment to moment. That's why you have an elected board that gets to react to what your public wants you to do and your citizens want you to do. They're the ones who are able to take this topic that a week ago no one even knew was going to be the leading topic at this public meeting, and they're able to go, you know what, we're going to address this. We're going to address this first and foremost during this meeting, and we're really going to vet this with the public who's here to find out more about this or be able to speak. So when you start to think, oh, good, we spent some money, we got some really interesting stuff, we got it all turned on, it looks really cool, I'm done here. Yeah. You're a dinosaur, because your public's expectations evolve a lot quicker than what the technology does. So the modernization is a constant.
It is.
It's a constant drumbeat. And I think a lot of people just, they know that. I think a lot of our clients, our sponsors especially, are savvy enough to know that. But then the question just becomes, well, then how the heck do I stay on top of that if I know it's going to be a continuing struggle, or it's going to be a continuing project to keep modernization going? But it is. The moment you find one-time dollars, you buy a bunch of stuff, you turn it on, that's going to last you maybe a year and a half, and then it's going to age, and you're going to be right back where you were before, when you were in the bust cycle of technology, when you couldn't get money, you couldn't get motivation from folks, and you have to be able to sustain a lot of this and see what makes sense for you financially and resource-wise going forward.
Yeah, don't get complacent. Don't be a dinosaur. Things are constantly evolving and changing, and especially in the technology space. Just look at how quickly AI has what's the word I'm trying to say? I mean, we were just using chatbots,
Oh
last
yeah, leapfrog is the word I would use.
leapfrog. Yes,
It literally
sorry.
leapfrogs over itself over the
Yes.
course of a day or a couple of weeks.
Yes, absolutely. So Brian is joining us today, our newest member of the team. And RK, I'll let you sort of introduce Brian. But Brian says, I often find the selection process is a learning experience for the client, not just in terms of software vendors they're looking at, but also finding out realistically how engaged their team can be and what kind of commitment they're able to make throughout an implementation. And that will be one of the biggest factors in the timeline.
Yeah, so Brian, super savvy project manager, and glad to have him on our team. And this question is another example as to why we love having Brian on the team, because yeah, he's exactly right. There's this aspect of ERP is not real until situations like this start to occur. And let me phrase that a little bit better. So we don't like our new system. We want to be on a new system. We've got the funding, we've got the political capital, we've got the buy-in from the organization. Let's go. At that point, it's still not real. So when you start diving into the details, like he's talking about with selection, and you start planning out implementation, it starts to become really real to staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's where initially there might not be some resistance. Now there might be some resistance from folks who are like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to learn a new system, which honestly, a lot of people, that's what they worry about. Is this going to change my job? Is this going to eliminate my job? Am I not going to be able to keep up with the modernization within my department, even though I'm the department leader? But now I have my own insecurities about how this is going to play out. If we're going to dive into the details as to what we need for software, is this going to expose a weakness or vulnerability I didn't know about? These are the things that start to become real for the client as you start actually getting into the nuts and bolts of selection, and even by implementation as well. And it's classic. Even when you get to the point of the kickoff for the implementation, everyone's attitude in the room changes. They're excited, but they're also like, oh, wow.
Terrified.
This is not just something we've been talking about for 3 years. This is actually going to start, and this is actually going to require a lot of my time. And in a year or less, I'm going to be live on a new system. And so coaxing them through that reality and through that step is part of the change management process as well.
Which is mind-boggling to me. These clients, no offense, but the clients who don't use a consultant or an independent advisor to hold their hand through this implementation process, they're just working directly with the vendor. I can't imagine how mind-boggling and terrifying that could be as well. Do you have thoughts on not using a consultant, like a small commercial? But in terms of timeline, I can't imagine. I mean, I think that's why a lot of implementations fail. There's no third party PMO to hold those vendors accountable. So, what are your thoughts on that? And then we'll wrap up, RK.
Yeah, one of the ways I look at it is you have two distinct silos. Then you've got the client who's in their siloed world. This is all they've known for the past 5 years, in some cases 25, 30 years. They've been with the organization. Sometimes they've had the system around for that long, their existing one. So they're in a silo of, they just know their world. And their world includes not having ERP modernization come along every 5 years or every 10 years. So some people have never even been through an ERP selection and an implementation. They're sitting in their silo. The other silo across the way is the software vendor and the implementer for that. They're a little less siloed because they have broad customer experience, but they also know only a few ways of doing things, because that's what fits their particular system. This is what fits their standard timeline. And again, they're going for path of least resistance.
Yeah.
It's not that they're going, let's just get them live and get our money and run. They're going, this is how we know if we implement it on this exact way, we know with 100% certainty that this will work well and you guys will be live. But they're going to be ignoring a lot of other factors involved in this client sitting in their silo. And so you need that person in the middle who's able to bring both the client experience and working with the clients and understanding that client, because again, we usually have been working with them for several months, and then marrying our experience and our expertise in implementing a variety of systems in a variety of situations, especially with one software vendor in particular. There could be numerous variations
Right.
on that particular implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are able to bridge those silos and prevent it from being, this person speaks this language, the software vendor goes, I don't understand what that means, so let me just reiterate with you that we're going to go live on March 1st. It's the lack of communication can become very out of control in those situations because the client doesn't know what they should be asking the software vendor, and the software vendor is just going to give you the standard answer that they need to be able to get going and get this implemented. That's why you need a third party in there to help you and be your advocate.
Yes, and in the past, we've seen those who do not use a third-party consultant end up spending way more money in the long run, if you can imagine that. And maybe that's a topic for next time. But guys, we're going to wrap up today. Thank you, Robert, for joining me today, especially since you're on site. Good luck with your meetings. And if you're just joining us or if you're watching this later, make sure you go out and download our 2025 report. We talk about all things digital transformation, tips, tricks, things to consider. And we're constantly updating that because, again, our dream is to be the trusted advisor in this space as an agnostic partner for our clients. So, Robert, thank you. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.